On one occasion, he took up the study of jewels and appeared at a costume ball as Anne de Joyeuse, Admiral of France, in a dress covered with 560 pearls. This taste enthralled him for years, and indeed may be said to never have left him. He would often spend a whole day settling and resettling in their cases the various stones that he had collected, such as the olive green chrysoberyl that turns red by lamplight, the cymophane with its wire-like line of silver, the pistachio-colored peridot, rose-pink and wine-yellow topazes, carbuncles of fiery scarlet with tremulous four-rayed stars, flame-red cinnamon stones, orange and violet spinels, and amethysts with their alternate layers of ruby and sapphire. He loved the red gold of the sunstone, and the moonstone's pearly whiteness, and the broken rainbow of the milky opal. He procured from Amsterdam 3 emeralds of extraordinary size and richness of color, and had a turquoise that was the envy of all the connoisseurs. This is sight, right? Like, we've got another one of his 5 senses going on here. He's spending his time staring at the beautiful light reflecting through jewels, but it's also opulent. I mean, we're talking about a very expensive hobby that only the ultra-rich can afford. He discovered wonderful stories also about jewels. In Alfonso's Clericalis Disciplina, a serpent, another snake. We have all these snake references in here, going back to the Garden of Eden and the Christian symbolism that underlies everything that's going on throughout this entire book. I think that's worth noting. A serpent was mentioned with eyes of real jacinth. I can't say that one. And in the romantic history of Alexander, the conqueror of Emathia was said to have found in the Vale of Jordan snakes, quote, with collars of real emeralds growing on their backs, end quote. This was a gem in the brain of the... There was a gem in the brain of the dragon, Philostratus told us, and by exhibition of golden letters and scarlet robe, the monster could be thrown into a magical sleep and slain. According to the great alchemist Pierre de Boniface, the diamond rendered a man invisible, and the agate of India made him eloquent. The cornelian appeased anger, and the hyacinth provoked sleep, and the amethyst drove away fumes of wine. The garnet cast out demons, and the hydropicus deprived the moon of her color. The selenite waxed and waned with the moon, and the melochius that discovered thieves could be affected only by the blood of kids. Leonardus Camillus had seen a white stone taken from the brain of a newly killed toad that was certain antidote against poison. The bezoar that was found in the heart of the Arabian deer was a charm that could cure the plague. In the nests of Arabian birds was the aspilates that, according to Democritus, kept the wearer from any danger by fire. The king of Cilion rode through the city with a large ruby in his hand, and at the ceremony of his coronation, the gates of the palace of John the priest were, quote, made sardis with the horn of the horned snake, another snake, inwrought so that no man might bring poison within. Over the gable were, quote, 2 golden apples, in which were 2 carbuncles, so the gold might shine by day and the carbuncles by night. In Lodge's strange romance, a Marguerite of America, it was stated that in the chamber of the queen, one could behold, quote, all the chaste ladies of the world encased out of silver, looking through fair mirrors of chrysolites, carbuncles, sapphires, and green emeralds. Marco Polo had seen the inhabitants of Zipangu place rose-colored pearls in the mouths of the dead. A sea monster had been enamored of the pearl that the diver brought to King Perzoes and slain the thief and mourned for several moons over its loss. When the Huns lured the king into the great pit, he flung it away. Procipitus tells us a story, nor was it ever found again, though the emperor Anastasius offered 500 weight of gold pieces for it. The king of Malabar had shown to a certain Venetian a rosary of 304 pearls, one for every god that he worshipped. You see what I'm saying about, like, we could skip this chapter and it wouldn't hurt you too much? I think there are important things going on, but it's cloaked in a lot of this backstory. Like, the allusions come fast and thick, and if you go and look them all up, I'm sure they bear fruit to some degree. But I think that what Oscar Wilde really wants you to get out of this is that Dorian Gray has completely abandoned himself to this new hedonism theory. He's collecting sensations that only he has the resources to collect. And not only is he interested in the physical sensation of things, he's also interested in the history of those things and the connections that they make. He's adding art to the sensation by connecting it through allusion to previous stories and previous works of art. And I think that's important for him. Anyway, it keeps going. When the Duke de Valentonis, son of Alexander IV, visited Louis XII of France, his horse was loaded with gold leaves, according to Brantome, and his cap had double rows of rubies that threw out a great light. Charles of England had ridden in stirrups hung with 421 diamonds. Richard II had a coat valued at 30,000 marks, which was covered with balas rubies. Hall described Henry VIII on his way to the Tower, previous to his coronation, as wearing, quote, a jacket of raised gold, the placard embroidered with diamonds and other rich stones, and a great bauderike about his neck of large balasses. The favorites of James I wore earrings of emerald set in gold filigree. Edward II gave to Piers Gaveston a suit of red gold armor studded with jacinths, a collar of gold roses set with turquoise stones, and a skull cap with pearls. Henry II wore jeweled gloves reaching to the elbow and had a hawk glove sewn with 12 rubies and 52 great orients. The ducal hat of Charles the Rash, the last Duke of Burgundy of his race, was hung with pear-shaped pearls and studded with sapphires. How exquisite life had once been. How gorgeous in its pomp and decoration. Even to read of the luxury of the dead was wonderful. Then he turned his attention to embroideries and to the tapestries that performed the office of frescoes in the chill rooms of the northern nations of Europe. So now we moved on from sight to touch. We're talking about texture and fabric. He investigated the subject, and he always had extraordinary faculty of becoming absolutely absorbed for the moment in whatever he took up. He was almost saddened by the reflection of the ruin that time brought on beautiful and wonderful things, as opposed to him, which never ages. I think that's an implied contrast. He, at any rate, had escaped that. Summer followed summer, and the yellow jonquils bloomed and died many times, and nights of horror repeated the story of their shame, but he was unchanged. No winter marred his face or stained his flower-like bloom. How different it was with material things. Where had they passed to? What was the great crocus-colored robe where was the great crocus-colored robe on which the gods fought against the giants that had been worked by brown girls for the pleasure of Athena? Where the huge velarum that Nero had stretched across the Colosseum at Rome, that Titan sail of purple on which was represented the starry sky and Apollo driving a chariot drawn by white Gilterine steeds? He longed to see the curious table napkins wrought for the priest of the sun, on which were displayed all the dainties and viands that could be wanted for a feast. The mortuary cloth of King Chilperic, with its 300 golden bees, the fantastic robes that excited the indignation of the Bishop of Pontus, and were figured with lions, panthers, bears, dogs, forests, rocks, hunters, all in fact that a painter can copy from nature. And the coat of Charles of Orleans once wore, on the sleeves of which were embroidered the verses of a song beginning, Madame de Jesus tout joie. The musical accompaniment of the words being wrought in gold thread, and each note of square shape in those days formed with 4 pearls. He read of the room that was prepared at the palace in Rheims for the use of Queen Joan of Burgundy, and was decorated with, quote, 1,321 parrots made in embroidery, emblazoned with the king's arms, and 561 butterflies whose wings were similarly ornamented with the arms of the queen. The whole worked in gold. This keeps going. But, again, we're getting the opulence, but I think one of the things that's really important here is that Dorian Gray feels sad that all of these beautiful things have passed from the world because they don't last. Time goes on, and they're mortal. They're more mortal than he is. He has become his soul's reflection at a particular point in time. And so even though the soul in the picture continues to get worse, he feels immortal. He's more immortal than an outfit or a cloth that doesn't age, but it does. It ages in the sense that it grows frail and thin and rips and tears and degrades and decays. And I think that might be one of the fascinations with this particular thing that he's studying. Anyway, it goes on. Let's have some more lists of ancient cloths, shall we? Let's see. Catherine had a mourning bed made for her of black velvet powdered with crescents and suns. Its curtains were of damask with leafy wreaths and garlands figured upon gold and silver ground and fringed along the edges with broideries of pearls. And it stood in a room hung with rows of the queen's devices and cut black velvet upon a cloth of silver. Louis XIV had gold embroidered caryatides 15 feet high in his apartment. The state bed of Sobieski, king of Poland, was made of Smyrna gold brocade embroidered in turquoise with verses of the Koran. Its supporters were of silver gilt, beautifully chased and profusely set with enameled and jeweled medallions, and it had been taken from the Turkish camp before Vienna, and the standard of Mohammed had stood beneath the tremulous gilt of its canopy. And so, for a whole year, he sought to accumulate the most exquisite specimens that he could find of textile and embroidered work, getting the dainty Delhi museums finely wrought with gold thread, palmates, and stitched over with iridescent beetles' wings, the Dhaka gauzes that from their transparency are known in the East as woven air and running water and evening dew, strange figured cloths from Java, elaborate yellow Chinese hangings, books bound in tawny satins or fair blue silks, and wrought with fleur-de-lis, birds, and images, veils of laces worked in Hungary point, Sicilian brocades and stiff Spanish velvets, Georgian work with its gilt coins, Japanese fukosas with their green-toned gold and their marvelously plumaged birds. He had a special passion also for ecclesiastical vestments. That means things having to do with the church. As indeed he had for everything connected with the service of the church. In the long cedar chests that lined the west gallery of his house, he had stored away many rare and beautiful specimens of what is really the raiment of the bride of Christ, who must wear purple and jewels and fine linen that she may hide the pallid, macerated body that is worn by the suffering that she seeks for, and wounded by self-inflicted pain. He possessed a gorgeous cope of crimson silk and gold thread damask, figuring with a repeating pattern of golden pomegranates set in 6-petaled formal blossoms, beyond which on either side was the pineapple device wrought in seed pearls. The orpheries were divided into panels representing scenes from the life of the Virgin, and the coronation of the Virgin was figured in colored silks upon the hood. This was Italian work of the 15th century. Another cope was of green velvet embroidered with heart-shaped groups of acanthus leaves, from which spread long-stemmed white blossoms, the details of which were picked out with silver thread and colored crystals. The Morse bore a seraph's head in a gold thread raised work. The Orpheus were woven in a diaper of red and gold silk and were starred with medallions of many saints and martyrs, among whom was Saint Sebastian. He had chasubles also of amber-colored silk and blue silk and gold brocade and yellow silk damask and cloth of gold, figured with the representations of the Passion and Crucifixion of Christ, and embroidered with lions and peacocks and other emblems, dalmatics of white satin and pink silk damask, decorated with tulips and dolphins, fleur-de-lis, altar frontals of crimson velvet and blue linen, and many corporals, chalice veils, and sundaria. In the mystic offices to which such things were put, there was something that quickened his imagination. For these treasures and everything that he collected in his lovely house were to be to him a means of forgetfulness, modes by which he could escape for a season